providing insights to help you grow your business, improve yourself, and add value to those around you. You're listening to the Success is a Choice podcast, where you get a peek into the lives of industry leaders as they share their stories with you.
Hey, welcome everybody to the Success is a Choice podcast. I'm your host, Jamy Bechler, and we have a real treat for you today. We have Kristin Marcuccilli on the show. She is the president of Star Financial Group. They are a big time banking company, financial company in Indiana. So Kristin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jamie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we are glad to have you here. I want to probably ask you one of the hardest questions that I'll ask you the whole time. What was harder for you, being on Dancing with the Stars Fort Wayne or playing high school football?
Oh, Dancing with the Stars was really hard. I had no idea what I had signed up for, and I walked in the room and there's 1,500 people there. I'm like, what is this? But challenging in different ways, for sure. But I'm probably going to go with Dancing with the Stars on that one, actually. That was harder.
So that was a few years ago, and you weren't as familiar with dancing as you were football, but you had a coach, you had a partner who taught you. What was that like, going through Dancing with the Stars? You know, we see it on TV. Obviously, it wasn't at that level of national TV, but it's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big fundraiser from what I understand. Walk us through that, how you got selected, and just your thoughts going through that.
Yeah, it's an incredible fundraiser for just an awesome organization in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So it's for the Carriage House. And I think they typically, they like to engage corporate partners for this annual event, and Star had not yet participated. So I think they had been bugging my dad and uncle for a while, saying, hey, we got to get Star out there. And I do have some background in dancing, believe it or not. I think it did help with soccer and football, basketball, but I had never performed with a professional partner on that type of stage. So, once you get back past the immediate fear factor, you've got 16, 17 lessons under your belt, but you go into that room and there's this immediate bit of shock, and you just have to remind yourself it is for the cause. It has absolutely nothing to do with me. And so go have a good time. I danced to Michael Jackson, beat it, so it was great. Who can't have a fun time to that? So it was awesome.
Now, do you continue to dance? Do you use the skills that you learned in your life now?
I have not continued to dance consistently, but it is something that's on my list of things to pursue again down the road. So I do love to dance, but I'm not doing it on a consistent basis right now, not in the ballroom.
Well, we mentioned that you were a football player at Marion High School, the Marion Giants, and you were also a soccer player as well. That's obviously not something you see every day. And for those of you wanting to get into the weeds and dig deep into financials and banking and corporate strategy, we'll get to that in a few minutes. But let's get to the real stuff. High school football, your playing career. How'd you decide to be a football player, and what was that like, obviously being a female on an all-male team?
Sure. So at the time, and this might sound funny to some because this was late 90s, early 2000s, but in Marion, Indiana, at that point, we unfortunately did not offer women's soccer, and of course not football. So at the time, I was traveling outside of Marion to Fort Wayne if I wanted to play, girls club soccer. My mom was a trooper and drove me everywhere. So I was playing on the boys soccer team at the time, and my best friend, his backyard was the football stadium in Marion. So it was Captain Brandon Barrett. And we're out one Sunday afternoon just goofing around with a football on the football field. And he's like, here, try and kick a few. So I did. He goes, you can actually kick a ball. I was like, well, I've played soccer most of my life. I hope I can kick a ball. And he went to the football coach, it was Mark Surface at the time, and said, hey, I think I found us a kicker, because they'd struggled getting consistency in that position. He's like, that's awesome. Who is he? And he goes, well, he's a she. It's like, really? And he goes, yeah. He goes, well, bring her out to practice. Let's see what she's got. So I skipped soccer one afternoon and went and tried out as their place kicker. And this was my sophomore year. I did not go out immediately, but I did end up being the starting kicker my junior and senior year.
So did you do kickoffs? And if you did, everyone would want to know, did you have to make any tackles?
So Coach Surface was not a big fan of me doing kickoffs. I wanted to, but when it came to punting and kickoffs, he was like, I'd rather not put you directly in a line of fire. And I would practice for it. I would practice with the defensive backs and actually learn how to tackle and how to be tackled and all of those things. But no, I did not do kickoffs. We had very few field goal attempts in my 2 years as their place kicker. And one of them was a planned fake, and the other, I believe that there was an immediate penalty, and we got the first down and forged ahead. So no, he was very careful about where he put me on the field.
Well, and you mentioned Brandon Barrett, your best friend, helped you get on the football team and that kind of stuff. He was known as an exceptional athlete, also a hero. For years, you've done a fund or a lot of fundraising for his charity, or a charity honoring him and giving back to the community, especially there in Marion. He passed away overseas and in military service, not just with what you've done with that, even though I'd like you to talk about that a little bit, but just the other things that you're doing in the community to give back, to help others, to lift people up as you're able to.
Sure. No, I mean, Brandon was such a special person. I think he was a friend to everyone. And I think the fact that this annual event, he has so many friends and family who rally around his name, his honor, right, to raise funds every year for a scholarship that is given to someone who did similar things as Brandon, academically and athletically. And I think tragedy teaches you a lot about who you are and how you want to serve. I think teamwork and team sports teaches you a lot about who you are and how you want to serve. And so I think they're just experiences that I've carried with me to always think bigger than yourself, right? Try and do things that, of course, you're passionate about and make sure you're giving your best, yes, but do things that can help the greater good, the broader community, and just think beyond you.
Well, I know his legacy has lived on amazingly, even all these years later. And the scholarship money that you're able to give has helped other people as well. And people still give, people still tune in or turn up for these events. And so that's a lasting legacy to who Brandon was. So we appreciate what you've done in helping with that as well. So you went to Notre Dame. And you worked with the football team there. So you weren't just someone that could kick a ball. You obviously loved football, and you continued on in football. We're going to see kind of a theme here, but a female in a men's game, or somebody that maybe is an outsider, somebody that maybe has to work a little bit harder to make it. Let us in. Notre Dame is one of the greatest programs of all time when it comes to football, and you were a part of that. How was that to be part of one of those great programs?
It was such an incredible experience. I think about it often. That door opened for me because I went to football camp while I was still in high school at Notre Dame, right? So yes, I was the only female at this kicking camp. And at the time, Bob Davie was the coach, and he came up to me while I was practicing, and he's like, I've heard about you. And He goes, have you ever had an interest in coming to Notre Dame? I said, sir, I've wanted to come to Notre Dame my entire life. And I said, yeah, absolutely. He goes, well, if you get accepted, he goes, I want you to keep in touch. If you want to stay involved with the program, we'd love to have you. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't ask. And I did get my acceptance letter the following spring. And so I shared this with our athletic director, and he's like, well, we have to call. Obviously, we're going to find out what exactly he meant. And so I remember the day Bob Davie called my home phone, and my brother came in. He's like, you got to take this call. It's the coach from Notre Dame. I'm like, you're kidding me. And he just said, Kristin, he goes, I understand you were accepted. Congratulations. He's like, now let's talk about your involvement with the program. And he said, I'll be honest. He goes, the doors are all wide open. If you want to be a trainer, come train with our trainers. If you want to get into managing, come join the managers. If you want to help out in our football office, then there's a spot for you there. He goes, but if you think you want to try out for the team, he goes, I don't want to discourage you. He's like, it'll be a media circus. But he's like, if you want to come train this winter and try out as a walk-on in the spring, you're welcome to. So it was certainly a wow moment for me, but I was, I think I was hesitant to say, yeah, sign me up, because I didn't know what I was walking into going into college. I was studying pre-med and psychology, and so I was certain I was already going to be in over my head. And I said, can I take some time to think about it? Could I work in your office and think about the other stuff later? He's like, absolutely. So that's because I played in high school and I attended their camp. That is ultimately what made that a reality. And then I worked under 3 different coaches, 4 if you count George O'Leary for one day. And Coach Weiss hired me my senior year. And so I worked there for about another 2.5 years, my first job out of college, and could not have asked for a more challenging but rewarding and fulfilling first job out of school. So.
Did you feel like you had to prove yourself, or did you actually have to go through an interview process each time a new coach came in?
So most of the change in coaches happened while I was still a student. And so there was no interview process once you were working in the recruiting office or player development that you were in as a student. The interviewing came my senior year when they were starting to do interviews for the full-time positions, and Charlie Weiss was just joining the staff. He liked that I had been around the office and the team for 4 years, so there's some consistency there. And he was willing to give me an opportunity in football operations, which is something I really wanted some experience in. I decided to bail on pre-med and go into medical school my junior year and just really set my sights on the business world and specifically in athletics administration. But I never felt like I had to prove anything. And maybe that goes back right to the days of playing the guys on the soccer team or the football team, because they would make me feel like part of the team. It was usually the opposition, right, that would want to call out or point out the fact that you're unique and let's try and make a point here. I always felt very fortunate that Coach Weiss or anyone else would give me the opportunities that they did and bring me into the room, right? Let me listen, let me learn. You certainly learn how to get thick skin quickly, but I think that would be the case whether you're male or female working in that environment. So no, it's just, I don't think I ever felt like I need to prove something here as a woman, thankfully.
Did you ever have serious thoughts about continuing in college athletics and continuing that path, or were you kind of just destined, hey, I'm going to go into the corporate world, I'm going to go into the business world, or was there some serious thought to staying in college athletics?
A lot of thought was given. I didn't. I mean, once I decided I wasn't going to go pursue medical school, and I had that role in the football office, my sights immediately shifted to working in athletics administration. I just felt like it was a nice fit. It motivated me. I loved meeting new people all of the time. And I get this question quite often, like, right, did you always know you were going to be destined to work in the family business and banking? And the answer is no. And we were not encouraged to, we were not discouraged, right, to come look at banking. But at that time, it was 100% focused on football operations, potentially in athletics administration. Yeah, so that's where my focus was for a good 3 to 4 years after college.
Well, without you don't have to mention necessarily names if you don't want to, but as you were working with Notre Dame football, you obviously saw some high level athletes. You also saw coaches that were Notre Dame football coaches. So you saw some very good examples of athletes coaching at different times. Did you see what was there a certain common theme or thread among the athletes that were really good, other than just they could run fast or jump high? Was there some leadership qualities that you maybe took away from them, whether it was athletes or coaches, that maybe help you now?
That's an awesome question. It's a tough one. The short answer is yes. I think the first quality that comes to mind, there is a degree of discipline, right, that you see come through. And if it's a player, you can see how focused they are. You can tell like they are going to cling to their regimen, whether that's the practice regimen or the pregame or the postgame. There's such consistency and structure and discipline to how they approach the sport. I think the coaches are the same way. There's a certain degree of discipline and work ethic. The hours that job called for, whether you are a coach or player. I'm not sure how many people realize during the season how early those mornings are and how late in the day they go. But it was not uncommon for us to be in our sweats and sometimes sleep on the office floor if we were only going to go home to sleep for a couple of hours, right? It just made more sense to stay put. But discipline and work ethic were certainly very prominent in my mind as two qualities that stood out. And then it was just the way they treat people around them, right? The way they would just talk and ask questions about you personally or professionally, and they didn't just treat you as though you're not there or an afterthought. There was a warmth or a welcomeness, I think, around both players and coaches that to me was always very admirable.
You being involved in Notre Dame football, they've had tremendous success on the field for so long. Lots of wins, lots of championships. You're in the business world now. Oftentimes you look at success as the bottom line. Are we making more money? Are we making a lot of money? Those kinds of things. Has your definition of success changed over the years? Does it vary? Do you look at it differently if it's sports? Do you look at it differently in your role now as president of Star Financial Group? What do you think of when you think of the definition of success?
Sure. To me, and this is probably another lesson that I learned. I went back to school when I was 24, maybe 25. And one of the first classes that I sat in was a management and leadership course. And our first assignment was to define our core values. And I'd never gone through that before, like define your personal core values, right? If violated, like it's just not going to work. And so I pored over what are all the different types of core values and what do different organizations follow or leaders follow. And I would encourage anyone to do that exercise if they never have. But once you define what really matters to you, right? Is it honesty and integrity? Is it the energy and work ethic? Like, what is it that makes up what you believe in? Then I think it becomes easier to determine whether it's in sports or it's in a corporate office setting, what success means, right? Was this successful? Because those values start to really come through. And for me, I think it's 100% just grown over time, but it's probably the value of relationships in any of those places, right? Establishing trust and knowing who you can lean on and they can lean on you. They're good listeners, right? So to me, success isn't so much let's look at the bottom line or let's look at the 8-4 record at the end of the year in the case of the Irish. But I look to the strength of the relationships and have I helped create trust and build trust in that, or have I done something that's eroded that in any way? So that's how I look at success.
Well, we will get back to Kristin in just a moment, and we will talk to her more about what she's doing now with Star Financial Group, what she's doing in the business world, the corporate world. But first, building upon what she said with relationships, with teamwork, with some of the stuff that she saw at Notre Dame and some of the stuff that she's dealing with now in the corporate world. This episode is sponsored by theleadershipplaybook.com, theleadershipplaybook.com. And if you're a parent, if you're a coach, if you're an athletic director, there's student athletes that you care about. There's student athletes that mean a lot to you, and you want them to be more positive leaders. You want them to be better teammates. The leadershipplaybook.com can help with that. It's an online program, all kinds of videos, 2-minute videos, so they can learn how to be a better teammate, learn how to be a more positive leader, just 2 minutes at a time. If you use coupon code CHOICE, as in success is a choice, you'll get 25% off. So go ahead, visit theleadershipplaybook.com, theleadershipplaybook.com, and use coupon code CHOICE to get yourself 25% off. So I mentioned Kristin is the president of Star Financial Group. Your work, one of your core values, one of the most important core values you just mentioned was relationships. And I know you don't have, your finger on hiring of all the hundreds and hundreds of employees that you have, but relationships being important, I would imagine that who you surround yourself on your team, the team members you bring in to Star, matters to you. What do you look for in an employee, in a team member? How do you go about bringing in the right people so that your culture is strong? Or how do you go about hiring the people that will hire all the people? Because obviously you can't interview every single employee that works for Star.
Sure. I think it's one of the most important decisions you make in business is the talent that's on the team. And you, of course, want to make sure that you represent a company and a set of core values that is attractive to people to want to come work with you. But it's a process. I think, I think through who will work with this person closely on a consistent basis. And it's not uncommon now to see 5, 7, 10 people interview a single candidate for a position. And I think, years ago that sounded just like overkill in my mind. Now I think it's just become best practice because you want to hear the perspectives of what these other leaders pick up on throughout the interview process. And some of the questions might be redundant, yes, but I think you can make better decisions on the individual if you've got more perspectives throughout. It's not always about the experience, right? If they directly worked in banking before, they could be coming from another industry entirely, but you have to really know what seat you're trying to fill and what qualities are most important. Communication, is it critical thinking and problem solving? And so if you've done a good job of clearly defining what matters most, and hopefully you've had the benefit of learning what works really well in that seat and where there have been some obstacles, then it can make it easier. But someone just asked me this recently about in an interviewing process, and I have to laugh because my dad, I've sat in a few interviews with him where he's interviewing a candidate with me, and he will always want to find out about the person, not just what's on the resume. And I'm pretty sure 99.9% of the time he will ask the candidate if they played sports in high school or in college, and did they play team sports. And for a while I'm like, well, that's kind of weird, but no, I get it now, because that can weigh in a lot on the person's experiences and their ability to think as a team, know their role and their contribution and the value that they can add. So I think it matters. It's a good question to ask.
Well, we talk all the time in sports. Great teams have great teammates. It's really no different in business. Oftentimes there's that same correlation, and you also see some of the same companies year after year have solid profit loss statements, or the numbers are all adding up because they take their culture seriously, because they value relationships, or they value who they bring in. They want to have a great team, so they want to bring in great teammates, not just the most talented. Obviously you want people that are talented, but you also want the right people.
Right.
Talk us through a little bit your progression at Star Financial, your progression in the business world, where you've come from to where you're at right now.
Sure. So I joined the team about 15 years ago. I'm coming up on my 15-year anniversary in March. And when I started, it was really more of a project management type role. And so I was not part of a big team at that point in time. It wasn't too much later that I was asked to start to manage one or two others. I'd never managed people outside of the football office before, so that was a little bit new to me. But the path really went more toward the digital banking side of the community banking space. It was very much steeped in how we deliver products and services through different channels. I eventually landed in seats where it was more related to IT or security or risk management side of the bank. I was not the traditional, like going through the frontline staff as a banker in a branch or as a commercial lender in banking. All of my experience has really been in the operational side of the bank and in the strategic planning for the organization. So my stops have been in project management. I did a chapter in marketing and strategic planning. I was the chief operating officer for about 10 years. And so that role can be different for any company, but for us, it was a lot of the backroom operation and risk management, security, IT, project management. And then just very recently, this past June, was named the president of Star Financial Group, which is the holding company or parent company to Star Financial Bank.
So in other words, you're kind of a big deal.
I'm learning along the way, learning.
So how has it been being a female executive? And are you able to pull upon, hey, you were a female football player, or, does that have nothing to do with it? It's just it's two separate things, or just in general, what's been maybe the easiest or the hardest parts of being a female executive?
I think the ties back to playing on an all-male team, whether it's soccer or football, I still to this day would say that those were really beneficial experiences that just taught me how to work in that environment and with a team of males early on. So throughout my career, it hasn't been as big of a deal for me, right, or disruptive or odd to work in a male-dominated environment. I think it's, if you look at the numbers only in banking, and I'm sure in every industry, they put the numbers in front of you to show what percentage of an executive team is female, what percentage of a board is female. And by the numbers, it's not been great. I think it's slowly improving, and people are being more cognizant about diversity and inclusion, particularly at the executive level. But I kind of go back to Coach Surface's lesson of you had to try out for that starting kicker seat every week, right? And it wasn't a given that you were going to get to suit up and play on Friday night. So you auditioned or tried out for the role every Thursday, and it was may the best person win. And so I think that mentality just stuck with me, that it doesn't have to be so much about male or female. If you work hard and you can outperform someone next to you, then hopefully you're going to be given that opportunity to demonstrate what you can do. And I think that still matters in the workplace. So by the numbers, I recognize that it's not where most would want it to see, and it does not look fair and balanced and equitable across the board. But I think it can be what we make of it if people are willing to push for the seat and care less about the gender.
Well, when you were involved in sports, there's head coaches, and especially the higher level you go, head coaches become almost a chief executive officer. Maybe they've worked on both offense and defense, but they've done a lot of things throughout their career. Now as a head coach, they're kind of overseeing the whole program. You mentioned coming up kind of a non-traditional route in the banking world, in terms of you didn't start off as a teller and then become a head teller and then become an assistant manager and a manager at a branch. Now that you're over all of these different parts to Star Financial. There's so many things that's under your supervision or under your authority. How have you managed to learn about all these things, or put the right people in place, or so you're just not focused on one thing, so you understand all the parts to Star Financial, because it's large,
Right. I think it starts with getting comfortable with or confident, and you don't have to know everything about everything. And this is coming from like a type A person, perfectionist, to the extreme. And so once you get to a place where you realize that it is in fact so much smarter and better for you to put people in seats who are so much more detailed, or that is their craft, hire people smarter than you to put in these seats, it will yield one of the most rewarding team outcomes I think that you can experience. So I've learned a lot from make sure you're getting the best person in those seats. Number two, I think it's about really taking the time to get to know every person on the team, because you need to know how they're wired, right? You need to know personally what's important to them, what are their core values. Professionally, it's really important that you know their strengths and their weaknesses, no different than when a coach is figuring out what's the right combination of players to put on the field or put on the court at this time. That, to me, if you're willing to go to the level of customization and specialization to make sure that the combination of skill sets and talents and personalities that you have around a table or rallying around a project, that to me is going to give you the best outcome if you get down into the trenches and really break it down person by person.
Well, there might be some people, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this that have bosses, and you're a quote unquote, I'm using air quotes for people listening to this on the audio, but you're a boss. How would you recommend people approach bosses, in air quotes, or approach those people that are higher than them on the organizational flow chart, let's say, to talk about, and this is more of a general question, not a specific, but talk to them about issues that they might have, suggestions they might have, getting a raise, or just communicating in general to someone that's higher up on that organizational flow chart when it comes to the corporate world?
Sure. I think that, it goes in both directions, meaning from the direct report and the supervisor or manager, that there has to be a comfort and a willingness to openly talk about those things. So as the manager, I should be asking you, what do you need more of from me? What do you need less of? What drives you crazy that I'm doing that you just prefer I stop altogether? And when you get to a place of trust and comfort where you can have dialogue back and forth, if it's about compensation, if it's about the work hours, right, flexibility of schedule, projects that have just gone haywire and are too complex. Like, if you can have real conversations with people, I think that it's better for both boss and for employee. But, coming through the management track, I don't think it's uncommon where I felt like when I first became a manager that you put this pressure on yourself, or you think that there's this expectation of how you have to act, or how you need to deliver and communicate things, or how firm you need to be, how early do you need to arrive, how late do you need to stay, right? So there's a lot of pressure that you can put on yourself, but over time, I've realized that it has less to do with all of those pressures that I've built up and put on myself. It's so much more to do with creating the relationships and the trust with the people who work around you.
Very good. How have you been able to help other people, maybe mentor them? Or I know you're very involved with some organizations, some programs there in Indiana of future business people, whether it's working with students or young professionals. What are some things that you're doing, or just advice you would have for young people as they're starting off in the business world?
My advice, and someone gave this advice to me, right, is surround yourself with mentors or advisors. And these don't have to be people that you work with every day. It doesn't have to be someone else within the company. Seek out input and advice and wisdom from those who've walked down different paths, or find others who are kind of in a similar state as you, right? And try and talk through or work through the journey together, I think is helpful. When you can maintain like this mindset of don't ever stop learning, don't ever stop growing as a person, and whether that is as a boss, a manager, or not, that to me is super powerful. And when you find people who are just those voracious learners and you know it, that to me it's one of the keys. So the minute you stop learning, you stop growing, you think that you've figured it all out, there's not a leadership book or there's not a conference keynote speaker that's going to really do it for you. That to me, that's when something's gone off track. I mean, to this day, I still have an executive coach. I don't know what I would do without my executive coach. And I don't wish to abandon that model. I would want it for everyone. It's just a really important guide or compass to have if you aspire to continue on that journey in a healthy way.
Well, that's a great point. And even Michael Phelps, the greatest swimmer of all time, or Usain Bolt, the fastest man who's ever lived, they had coaches. And it's not that their coach could run faster than Usain Bolt or swim faster than Michael Phelps, but they could just see things differently. They came at it from a different point of view, or they were able to offer guidance. And so I love what you say there about an executive coach, or just getting coaching, just having somebody there that can help you walk through life together and help you be the best version of yourself. So that's really cool.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
A couple years ago, I had the privilege of speaking to probably 100 to 150 star employees on Zoom, and I think your company has weekly or monthly sessions or something like that. But I wanted to just praise. I had a number of them reach out to me afterwards for advice, or, hey, I've got this thing. They just connected. And that to me was very telling. Obviously not everyone did that, but that was very telling that there would be some people that were quote unquote coachable. You know, as a former college coach, basketball coach, we like coachable athletes. And as a company, you want coachable employees. And so many of them were even branch managers. So I want to give kudos to your corporate culture, and that's just a few people, but I've known about 10, 11, 12 star employees, and they're all first class. So keep up the great work that you're doing. Any parting quotes that you love to throw out there to your employees, or any parting thoughts you want to leave our audience with as we wrap up here?
Man, put me on the spot.
Well, what's that thing that you always say? And when you say it, you know, your team members just roll their eyes, or they're like, oh, that's Kristin, or they can almost repeat it back to you. They know when you're going to say it, or if they could get t-shirts, they would get the t-shirt made of that thing that you're always saying.
I definitely have the reputation, or am known for being the person who loves structure, right? Have to have an agenda. There better be an agenda for why we're having this call or this meeting, or I'm out. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm made fun of for how much I love structure in most things, but
okay, so let's piggyback on that. And just because you love structure and you're a president of a company doesn't mean that you run meetings well. But what advice would you have for running meetings? Because we've all been at these meetings that we hate.
Yeah.
And first of all, I'm just gonna throw this out there. If there's not food at that meeting, then why do we even have it? There's got to be some snacks, and I'm talking more than just throw out some Tootsie Rolls on the conference table.
No, I'm with you on snacks. It's very important. Wait, what question am I answering?
The question is, how can we run a better meeting? What would be one piece of advice or one thing that you do? Now, you might run terrible meetings, Kristin. I don't know this, but what's the one thing that you're most proud of about meetings?
So we have, and this probably goes back to the whole, I love discipline and consistency and structure, but step one, have the meeting when there's a purpose to, right? Make sure there is a point to gathering. And I'm sure my team, we do have a weekly meeting every Monday afternoon. We huddle and we talk through things. And I'm sure they're like, oh, not another weekly meeting. But if you put some thought into what are some topics we can talk about as leaders? What are obstacles that are in our way? What's the coolest thing that you saw happen last week? Talking about something that happened outside of work, right? And so I've often found if you leave it to, does anyone have anything they want to, right? You leave it with a question, oftentimes you just get dead silence. It's crickets on the call or in the room. And so in a way that's comfortable for people, the more you can draw out or specifically say, hey, Jamy, talk to me about this, then you start to get people to open up and be a little bit more comfortable. But, I've seen so many organizations get sucked into the meeting trap, and I'm sure there are way too many of them. And time could be spent elsewhere. I'm sure of it. But you have to put some thought into what is the purpose of this and how can we make sure there's some cool takeaway, that we learned something in the room that day. Otherwise, you step back and like, why in the world did we do that?
Well, my first meeting when I was an athletic director, as a high school athletic director, I made this big, huge spread of a meal, all this great food, homemade, made it. I was really excited about it. The one thing I failed to bring is coffee, because I'm not a coffee drinker whatsoever, but I had everything else imaginable. And there were a number of coaches that were upset and actually went to the principal and let them know that I just made them be at a morning meeting without coffee. Now they're right. Now I thought they were a little sensitive about it, but they were right. I needed to get out of what I like and think about all the others. And I don't drink coffee, but, and the thing is, they all brought coffee. They all brought their own coffee cups and tumblers. They just wanted to top it off. But
well, how dare you not show up with that coffee?
I know, but lesson learned. It's not about what I like. It's about what other people like. Yeah. But I definitely have coffee. I definitely learned that about a meeting with a lot of people, especially in the morning.
We have teams, in banking, you have to prepare for crisis, right? If there's going to be a major incident and tornadoes blow through half the network or whatever, we have to come up with all these plans of who's in charge of what and who are you going to call. There's detailed plans, and there is actually a team here who will put emergency snacks. Like if you're going to keep me here for 40 hours straight and I don't have Funyuns and my Mountain Dew, then the plan is not going to be activated correctly. So you do need to know what matters to people.
That's great. Those are the little things that matter. Those are the little detail things that can be the difference between winning or losing. Yeah. It might not be on the scoreboard, but it might actually be. And we kind of joke about it, but it took me a little longer to win over those coaches than it would have if I brought coffee to begin with. And I know that sounds silly, but that's the reality of people. And sometimes that's the difference between winning and losing and in our culture. So, but Kristin, we really appreciate your input, your feedback, your thoughts today, and keep up the good work you're doing. As I mentioned, I've been impressed with the people I've connected with from your company. So thanks so much for what you're doing, and appreciate you being on the show today.
No, thank you. I love the time. I love the questions, and appreciate the compliments to the STAR team. We're very proud of the STAR family. So thank you for saying so.
Well, we appreciate that. And until next time, for all those listening on the Success is a Choice podcast network, or watching this even on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Rumble, wherever you're watching it across this big, huge globe we call Earth, appreciate you tuning in. And until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?